Hi, and welcome to this live reading from The Curse of Jean Lafitte by Mary Walsh. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, October 14th, 2023. Halloween in New Orleans. At every corner, the locals celebrated the departed souls who built their city, and some had never left. The spooky season in New Orleans was an unparalleled, transcendent phenomenon. While other cities carved rudimentary jack-o'-lanterns and passed out fun-sized candy bars to children dressed as their favorite superheroes, New Orleans held the authority on revering the entire month of October. Most of the Halloween debauchery was celebrated on shameless Bourbon Street and flowed out into the heart of the French Quarter. Like everything else, the City of the Dead took its favorite holiday to the extreme. A giant wooden pumpkin arched the entrance to the French market. Tour guides donned vampire capes and top hats as they guided unsuspecting sightseers through dimly lit streets, teasing their guests into believing they would see a ghost. A clutter of costumed skeletons invaded the front lawn of a St. Charles Avenue house with taglines of "May the corpse be with you" and "Bon bon vivant." The crew of Boo Parade turned Veau Carré into Boo Carré with the lavish purple and orange floats the weekend before Halloween. On Royal Street, brave mortals ventured onto the sidewalk beneath La Laurie Mansion, risking their destiny, haunted by the souls of tortured and murdered slaves. Through the fog barely lit by the new moon of the month, the Pride rocked back and forth on the mighty Mississippi. The ghost ship defied Hurricane Betsy, Katrina, and more recently Ida. Local legend, and through the eyes of inebriated tourists, stated that the phantom vessel haunted the powerful river. No one could board, and no one could leave. On calm nights, music and laughter rolled off of the ship. Her hexed crew had been patiently waiting. For 2 centuries, a curse had kept them on that boat, jealously watching the French Quarter evolve and modernize. The time had finally come. Now their captain, Jean Lafitte, could disembark and reverse the voodoo, releasing them of their purgatory. A tall, thin man, Lafitte wore a long red velvet coat adorned with gold buttons that covered a gaily colored silk shirt. Black taffeta breeches and woolen stockings protected his legs. His attire was made from the finest silk and wool that he acquired from wealthy passengers aboard captured ships. A pistol was attached to his sash with a cord so that once fired, it could be dropped quickly, but not lost while he resorted to the cutlass attached to his hip. He was gifted the gold-handled sword by his brother and business partner Pierre after they successfully assisted Andrew Jackson in the Battle of New Orleans. Fancy buckled shoes and a black leather tricorn hat completed his look. Lafitte was the captain of the Pride and was expected to dress the part even if he hadn't successfully stepped on land in 200 years. The strumpets he bedded 2 centuries earlier had called him handsome and charming. He missed their company. He stood on the quarterdeck addressing his crew. The ragtag men were tired of waiting, tired of each other, tired of only having the boundary of the Pride as their life for the past 2 centuries. They desired the company of women. The debaucherous activities of the French Quarter had taunted them long enough. They had repeatedly eaten the same beans, biscuits, and salted beef and wanted to taste something new. They begged to sail on a new adventure, yearning for the open waters. Ronan, the quartermaster, called for all hand hoy. "Avast, ye mateys!" Lafitte shouted to them. "The time has finally come." Cheers erupted in front of him. The men hoisted steins of grog and salute. "The 200th new moon of October is nigh. I can now leave the ship without repercussions. In a fortnight, when the moon is full, we shall be free. Stay here, and I shall return soon with our independence." More cheers echoed around the deck. Lafitte and his crew had not aged in 200 years. The spell they were under kept them from growing old or dying while they waited on the ship. Temporary immortality had its pros and cons. They were not ghosts, but felt a special power inside them. Curses could do that. Excited palms pounded Lafitte's back, and his crew wished him luck. His sailors' faces showed hope and pride for their captain. He climbed into the dinghy and rowed for the shore. Yelps and hurrahs echoed from the ship. Their freedom was on the horizon. Lafitte was rarely nervous. This was one of those times. As he pushed away from the pride, a ripple of panic filled him. He had been on the safety of the boat for what seemed like an eternity, and now he wasn't sure what to expect. As his crew watched him, he courageously dipped his hand into the river, his fear changing to elation. The strong pirate sat poised in the small dinghy. He was a skillful sailor. The boat gently bobbed atop the river's surface, reflecting the indigo sky above. As he gripped the oars firmly in his calloused hands, the sinewy muscles in his arms and back rippled with power. His chest expanded with each controlled breath. His focused expression revealed his determination. With a graceful rhythm, he leaned back, muscles tensing, and then propelled himself forward, sending the wooden oars slicing into the water. The dinghy responded obediently, gliding forward with each forceful stroke. The water parted smoothly around the bow, leaving a trail of ripples in its wake. Droplets of water danced in the air as the oars emerged from the river, only to dip back in again in an intricate dance between the proud pirate and the boat. His motions were efficient, precise, and laden with controlled strength. With every pull, the boat surged forward, gathering momentum as he poured his energy into each stroke. The oars creaked softly against the wooden oarlocks, the sound a rhythmic accompaniment to the harmony of man, boat, and water. Lafitte missed that feeling. As the distance between him and the shoreline decreased and the safety of the ship increased behind him, the pirate's focus remained unbroken. Time would tell if this excursion was fortuitous. A small current of river water splashed onto Lafitte's dinghy. The last time one of his crew attempted to leave the ship, he was sent to Davy Jones's locker. A bead of panicked sweat formed on Lafitte's brow. Few things frightened him. Not even the ocean or the rival buccaneers who threatened him. But the river did. The curse forced this feeling deep inside him. He gasped, knowing what could happen to him, but his fears quickly eased when the water seeped away without harm. A relieved exhale escaped his lips. Were his eyes deceiving him? Too much time spent on the ship had affected his vision. He rubbed his eyes as he thought he saw an apparition of his ill-fated seaman, Poop Deck Pete. When the younger sailors dove into the river and attempted to leave the pride, the waters swallowed him whole, never to be seen again. A few minutes later, he reached the shore. As Lafitte regained his land legs, the heels of his leather boots clapped against the river's weathered wooden dock. The sound echoed into the night. He took 2 unsteady steps, getting used to the solid earth, finally standing proud and erect. Being on a boat for so long affected his balance. He strode as if he owned the land upon which he walked. The transformation was almost instantaneous. Captain Jean Lafitte was back. In a few nights, the barely viewable moon above him would soon be a slender crescent in the dark sky. The upcoming shape reminded him of the moniker that he'd heard coined in 1835 for the port city around him, the Crescent City. Like the hidden moon looking down on him, the French Quarter was built in the early 1700s as a sharp bend in the Mississippi River, mimicking the moon above. The chemistry created by the river water, egrets, and camellia blossoms permeated the air. He made his way north along the near-empty Moonwalk Riverfront Park. Beside him, tall black street lamps lit the path. Their ominous structure stood sentry as the gateway to landlubbers. Lafitte and his crew had watched from the ship as the lamps changed from oil-lit to electricity over the years. A few buzzed Halloween revelers wandered by absorbed in their own fun. Lafitte left the park and crossed over the adjacent streetcar tracks. This mode of transportation remained unchanged almost as long as he had waited to break the wretched curse. Up and to his right, the French market had shuttered up for the night, its peddlers to return at first light. Most of the nearby buildings had maintained their original Spanish and French-style facades. He was happy that something still looked familiar to him. Lafitte made his way through small crowds on the sidewalk. Their tacky costumes and foul language puzzled him. He couldn't tell who was Creole and who was Cajun anymore. This wasn't the same New Orleans that he knew. 5 men dressed as pirates sauntered toward him. He didn't recognize the foes and tapped a hand to his sword, ready for a duel. A few steps behind, a man in authentic royalty garments joined the group. He didn't seem to belong, and no one else except Lafitte noticed him. The man caught Lafitte's eye, and the two exchanged a vengeful stare. Lafitte had the feeling he knew the man, but couldn't place him. Did he cross swords with him in the middle of Jackson Square 200 years earlier? Was the man a friend or foe? Scallywag, the man scoffed and raised his shoulders as if he was ready to duel. The enemy was in front of Lafitte. The insult stung, and only someone from the early 1800s would know what term. Lafitte was thankful his pistol in his sash was constantly loaded. The one and only time his gun was empty left him with a bullet hole in his left arm, a gift from an adversary. He wouldn't make that mistake again. As the leader of the pack plucked at his garb, Lafitte pulled out of his hard gaze with the foe. Hey man, great costume. The young man, not of any of his cohorts, didn't seem to notice the addition to their entourage. The 5 men laughed, and one knocked shoulders with him. Oh, sorry, man. He also admired Lafitte's attire. Great costume. Want to join us at Coop's place? The man nodded toward the bar up Decatur Street. Is that son of a biscuit eater invited? Lafitte snarled about the enemy. Huh? What? No, man, the 5 of us are good. 5? I see 6 of you. When Lafitte looked again, the man who cast the insult was gone. Lafitte cursed under his breath and drowned in thought. Who was that man, and where did he go? It was as if he disappeared into the night. Was he seeing things? Did too many nights on the Pride affect his sight, or did he have a new ability to now see things that a normal man couldn't? Was the man a ghost? Losing their patience with him, the jovial group of men gave up on their invitation and went on their way. Without checking for oncoming traffic, Lafitte took a few steps onto Decatur. In an instant, a car to Lafitte's right screeched to a halt inches from him and blared its horn. He had seen vehicles from the Pride, but this was the first time he came face to face with one. The driver shook his fist and yelled, Hey, dumbass, you gotta watch for cars! Lafitte pressed his lips together in annoyance and didn't break stride. As the car drove off, St. Philip Street stretched in the foggy darkness in front of him. He remembered it was the straightest path to his destination. 20 people gathered around a woman dressed in a vampire outfit as she regaled haunted tales and local legends of the city. Orange, green, and yellow Greek revival-style buildings lit up the night around them. On Lafitte's right, impaired clientele wandered in and out of MRB Bar. More gawked at him from the second-story wrought iron balcony. You heading to a Halloween party, Jack Sparrow? A woman wearing a witch costume shouted from above. Can we come? She cackled and jabbed her nearby friends in the arm with her elbow. Lafitte glanced up at her and smiled wide. He didn't know who Jack Sparrow was, but the wench was beautiful. 200 years had passed since he bedded a woman. He needed skin-on-skin contact. Along with drinking and gambling, the fairer sex was his vice. They had been readily available to him at any brothel with their open-bosomed blouses and tight corsets where he could crack Jenny's teacup. He missed their company. Aye, Belgloss. Spreading his arms out and maintaining eye contact, he bowed deeply from the sidewalk below her. The idea of a Halloween party eluded him, but he wanted her by his side. Just then, her friend said, We gotta go, and yanked the beautiful harlot inside away from Lafitte's sight. His lust shattered instantly, but he would not be deterred. Raising the brim of his hat, he saluted the space from where she stood. From the river, he had seen many wenches wandering the streets of the French Quarter. He could have his pick, but first, he had a curse to break. With a determined gait, he headed a few more blocks to his port of call.